howdy. What you guys want to talk about? Certainly not that. We're not going to talk about that. No, realistically, I'm fine with that title because in the video I said the series wasn't over. I just thought the title was fun because, like, nuggets, cooked chicken nuggets. You guys get it. So the Denver Nuggets take a 3-2 series lead. They win Game 5 against Minnesota in convincing fashion. And the story of the game certainly is obviously the Nikola Jokic game, but also the Rudy Gobert game, the fake defensive player of the year game, the we don't really like Rudy Gobert game, whatever you want to call it. Tough one for Rudy Gobert. Nikola Jokic had 40 and 12 with 0 turnovers. Basically the perfect playoff game in the biggest game of the year. And a good amount of that damage was done against Rudy Gobert. Now, to be clear, it wasn't all Rudy Gobert's fault. It was just, it's a fun title for the video. Sometimes that's how YouTube works. Fun titles are better. And it's interesting because kind of the story of, or one of the stories of the first handful of games in the playoffs for the Timberwolves to this point was the defensive play of Rudy Gobert, was this ability for him to, in the first series against Phoenix, step out and guard a little bit against these perimeter players. And then in this game against Denver, he wasn't guarding Jokic one-on-one. He was kind of playing in between, obviously, Cat and Nasri. Those were the primary defenders. He was able to defend against those lobs. He was able to obviously provide rim protection against Jokic. In this game, the Timberwolves tried everything. They really, really did. They threw everybody they could at Jokic. They might as well have gone box and 1, triangle and 2, zone. They could have done any of that stuff, and it honestly just would not have mattered. This is one of those Jokic games. This is the, hey, by the way, I'm the best player in the entire league. I won 3 MVPs in 4 years for a reason, Nikola Jokic game. And if you're wondering what exactly changed from games 1 and 2, where Minnesota went on the road against the defending champs, won the first 2 games, and now they find themselves down 3-2 in the series going back for game 6 to Minnesota, a couple of things changed. One, Jokic figured them out. He was like, hey, they really want me to try and be aggressive offensively and try and score. Like, they're baiting me into trying to score. They don't want me to find these other guys. They don't want me to facilitate. Okay, fine. I'll go get 40. Like, in the first quarter, that was the most aggressive offensive quarter I've ever seen from Jokic. Him just constantly going to the rim, attacking against Gobert, attacking against anybody that was out there. And all of a sudden, Minnesota was like, oh, we need to change some things. So then they were like, okay, maybe we'll put the defensive player of the year on him. Maybe we'll start, digging in on him a little bit. Maybe make him make some of those passes. Then he was like, okay, I'll just get all these assists, no turnovers, make the right play. They don't have an answer right now to Nikola Jokic. Now, granted, nobody really does. And I still think that trying to make him be a scorer is a good option. We saw it work really well in the first couple of games of the series with or without Gobert, with Gobert in game 1, without Gobert in game 2. But some other things have changed as well. Minnesota fans certainly going to point this one out. The officiating is a little different right now compared to how it was the first 2 games of the series. And certainly the lack of a suspension for Jamal Murray in game 3 needs to be discussed as well. I feel like everybody's going to talk about the Jokic game today. I have a video out about the game itself. I want to talk about what changed. So the officiating, first 2 games of the series, Minnesota was allowed to be extremely physical defensively, and not necessarily in a way of like, oh, they're just letting Minnesota get away with everything. They weren't fouling necessarily. They were just being really, really physical in a way that during the regular season you just can't, especially against Jamal Murray. They were picking him up full court. There were a lot of plays that weren't fouls, but certainly seemed like some contact that the officials just weren't calling. And over the last couple of games, that certainly flipped a little bit, and I think in the favor of Denver, because the advantage that Minnesota has in this series, specifically against the Nuggets, is they have size, length, physicality, and they aren't able to use that as much the last couple of games. And it's not an excuse. It's not the reason that Minnesota hasn't been able to win any of these last couple of games. Denver has made some adjustments in terms of how they're guarding Anthony Edwards. We talked about how good Jokic has been, but that certainly has been a factor in a huge contrast in how well Minnesota played in the first 2 games, especially defensively, and how they've played the last couple of games, especially defensively. Also want to talk about the Jamal Murray suspension, lack of suspension in game 3. This was talked about at the time, right? I felt like it was something that was an easy 1-game suspension, throwing stuff on the floor in the middle of the play. Shouldn't happen. Shouldn't be a thing. They fine him. They didn't suspend him. You can say what you want to about that decision. If Denver's up 2-0 in the series, Jamal Murray's not playing game 3. He's just not. Like that's just how it works. You can argue about it. You can complain about it, but the NBA is an entertainment business, right? And they're not just going to throw away a series that has potential to be really good just because they want to suspend Jamal Murray for game 3. And like I said, them being down 0-2 was absolutely the reason that it didn't happen. I think the other thing that changed here for Denver is they had a couple of days off here in between games 2 and game 3. And that allowed Jamal Murray to get healthy. He wasn't fantastic in game 5, but he was much better in games 3 and games 4. And that changed everything for Denver because it wasn't just Jokic and then nobody else. Jamal Murray looked like himself again, especially in some of the second halves of game 3 and 4. And that's a huge deal for them. Like, all that stuff went to the advantage of Denver in terms of the officiating, in terms of Jamal Murray not getting suspended, in terms of the days off between games 2 and 3. And it's not an excuse. Minnesota could have played better. Denver played much better over the last couple of games, but it is worth mentioning, right? And just to be clear, I'm not saying there's any kind of conspiracy against Minnesota, against Denver, because let's just think about it for a second. if the NBA wanted to kind of quote unquote fix the series in one direction or the other, right? I think they'd much rather have Anthony Edwards, the American guy, in the conference finals, potentially making the finals, this young player, exciting, charismatic. I think they'd much rather have that guy making the run rather than Jokic, who's very good, but his passion for basketball isn't as public as Anthony Edwards is. Let's just say that. And I certainly don't think the series is over. I mean, Minnesota looked like the title favorite through the first 6 games of the playoffs for a reason. They are extremely good. They can guard really well. They can figure a little bit more stuff out defensively. Mike Conley didn't play in game 5, which certainly hurt because Denver just really all out attacked. All of their defense was about stopping Anthony Edwards, and nobody else was really able to do much. And Denver, the other thing here is their other guys are hitting shots. Aaron Gordon has been really shooting the ball well for 3 games in a row now. KCP, Christian Brown, these guys were shooting well. Michael Porter Jr. didn't have a great game, neither did Jamal Murray, but some of the others for Denver that were just not existent through the first 2 games have showed up in the last 3. And just like things can completely flip after games 1 and 2, things can completely flip after game 5 as well. So I'm fully expecting a competitive game 6 and a possible game 7. But just an interesting development in the last, week or so in this Minnesota-Denver series. There was actually another basketball game last night, though. I feel like this is happening every night now where it's like one of the games is really interesting and the other, like, nobody really talks about. It is worth talking about, though, Pacers-Knicks. Knicks take a 3-2 series lead at home. We're going back to Indiana for game 6. Same situation as Denver-Minnesota. Jalen Brunson had another 40-point game. He has 5 40-point games in 11 playoff games so far. He's one off the Knicks playoff record in a single postseason for 40-point games. That's held by Bernard King with 6. And they've only played 11 playoff games. Like they have a very good chance to make the conference finals, and then beyond that, I'm not sure. And Jalen Brunson already almost has a franchise record. He's not even healthy. His foot is messed up. He's got all kinds of stuff wrapped around his hands trying to make his wrist feel better, and it just doesn't matter. He just shows up, drops over 40, and is not necessarily efficient, but like as the focal point of the offense is it's just so difficult to stop right now. Of course, back at home at MSG, Josh Hart, all these guys are running around making plays, and for the Pacers, they kind of feel like, especially in this game, they felt like a team, I should say, without a true star. Like Siakam is obviously really good. Tyrese Halliburton's really good, but Halliburton either wasn't healthy, wasn't being aggressive, wasn't having a good game, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden, they just looked like a bunch of role players out there. And like, I mean that in a complimentary way. Like they have depth. They have a lot of guys that do a lot of things well, but they didn't have a focal point guy. They didn't have a Jalen Brunson. They didn't have an Anthony Edwards. They didn't have a Nikola Jokic. And that's no disrespect to Tyrese Halliburton. He's clearly not healthy. I don't think he's been healthy in months. Like ever since, he got off to this great start at the beginning of the year and then got hurt. He hasn't been the same guy. And he was really, really good in games 3 and game 4 from a scoring perspective. But he hasn't been able to wasn't able to figure it out in game 5. And it's just really tough to win against a Knicks team that, yes, is depleted as well, dealing with a ton of injury issues themselves. But without that offensive engine, without someone that can create, without someone that gets you better shots than just TJ McConnell mid-range jumpers and a handful of open threes for some decent shooters, if you don't have someone that can do more than that for you, it's going to be tough to win against a Knicks team that guards as well as they do. I think they thought Siakam was going to be that guy. He's been very up and down in this series. There are times in which the Knicks are just really focused on trying to stop him because they know that Halliburton doesn't have it. And if Halliburton doesn't have it and all they have to do is guard Siakam and guard the three-point line, it's not that difficult of a team to guard, even with a Knicks team that's missing some key defensive personnel, namely OG Anunoby, who apparently is maybe thinking about coming back at some point in the next round if they do make it there. But tough one right now for Indiana. I find it hard to find a path for them to win the last 2 games of this series and advance to the conference finals unless Tyrese Halliburton gets back to the form that he was in games 3 and game 4. And I find that to be an unrealistic option. Last thing I want to talk about. We just don't talk about the Celtics anymore because they are not playing very interesting series. They played Miami without Jimmy Butler. They played Cleveland. Donovan Mitchell didn't play in game 4. They're up 3-1 in that series as of recording of this video. But their potential path to the finals needs to be discussed. It's probably the easiest path to the finals we've seen in the history of the league, certainly within the Eastern Conference, because round 1, they play Miami, no Jimmy Butler, 5-game series. Round 2, they play a Cleveland team that struggled with an Orlando team that's first time in the playoffs in a while, like just not that impressive of a postseason team, almost lost to them. Donovan Mitchell doesn't play in game 4. Jared Allen doesn't play the entirety of the series for Cleveland. They're probably going to win in 5. Absolute worst case, they're going to win in 6. And then if they were to make the conference finals, right, they would play either this Indiana team that we're already talking about, they don't have a star, Halliburton's hurt, all this stuff, a 6th seed in the conference, or a Knicks team that's missing like 4 of their top 8 rotation guys. Like if it seems like obviously Boston is going to make the finals. If for whatever reason they didn't make it, this would be the most dramatic playoff failure, arguably in the history of the league. Like for a team to win as many games as they did in the regular season, look as dominant as they did, and then not make it would be a catastrophe. It seems pretty likely that they're going to make it, but it has to be mentioned, right? Like this isn't supposed to happen. It's supposed to be hard to make the finals. I mean, Denver's proving that on the other side, dealing with a really, really tough Minnesota team. It's kind of crazy, and it's like we've waited this whole season. Boston's been really good the regular season. They hit a ton of threes, advanced stats, all this stuff looks really good. We go to the playoffs. Okay, now we're going to find out about the Celtics. Nope, they're just not going to play very good teams. If they make the finals, that's like the first time of the entire season that they're really going to be tested, that we're really going to figure out, okay, is this team actually good, or do they just hit shots? And it's just crazy to think that that could possibly happen in the finals. That's everything that happened yesterday. I'll see y'all next time.